This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
Hello, everybody. Namaskar. Good evening. Welcome to Storytellers Cafe, and I'm your host, Usha Venkatraman, bringing you another interesting edition this Sunday night. And Sunday morning for all of you in United States, Cincinnati, Phoenix, and Chicago. Welcome to Storytellers Cafe. And here's wishing everyone happy Holi. Since Holi is tomorrow, wishing everyone a very happy Holi festival. So giving you a little trivia about Holi, my friends, as you all know that it is a spring celebration of love, frolic, and colors. It's become so popular among the non-Hindus and also in many parts of the world, in South Asia, as well as people of other communities outside Asia also celebrate the festival of Holi, especially people living in Nepal, in the Indian subcontinent, all the Indian diasporas who are living in countries like Suriname, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, South Africa, Mauritius, Fiji, Malaysia, Jamaica, United Kingdom, United States, Netherlands, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Wishing everyone a very happy Holi. As you all know, Storytellers Cafe, part of Bharat FM, is being broadcast live all over the world. And you can also watch us on YouTube, hear us on the audio, on the radio as well. And it is to bring the global Indian diaspora closer. So welcome to Storytellers Cafe, and I have a wonderfully special guest for you. Remember, we are celebrating love. We are celebrating spring. So my guest tonight has these qualities. She has a spring in her step and she has love for the work that she does. Welcome, Katie. Katie Bagli, my friends. Welcome to Storytellers Cafe.
Thank you. Thank you, Usha. Thank you, Bharat.
Great pleasure to have you. And let me give all the viewers a small introduction about Katie. Katie is a young, award-winning children's writer as well as illustrator and columnist. I call her young, and you will realize why. Her passion for nature reflects in her many books, both prose and poetry. As we all know, storyteller's muse is the story, and we need authors who write such wonderful stories. Although Katie found her niche in writing for children only 9 years ago, she has 26 published titles to her credit so far and hopes to keep writing forever. I second that, Katie. Her book, The Mysterious Lovables, was shortlisted for the International Board on Books for Young People, and recently her book, The Flight of the Pink-Headed Ducks and Other Stories, got her long listed as the best author of children by Authorawards, a joint venture of Times of India and JK Papers Limited. Congratulations, Katie. Most of Katie's activities revolve around her two passions, nature and children. When she's not writing, she conducts storytelling sessions, workshops on wildlife creative writing, nature writing, creative poetry, cartoons, and comic strips. Along with her partner Nitya, Katie enjoys conducting a nature club for children that aims at drawing their interest and enthusiasm about the natural wealth of our planet. That's a great initiative, Katie. what you're doing to sustain our planet. Kudos to you. More than anything, Katie loves to be outdoors, exploring nature, conducting tree walks, and studying the behavior of the creepy crawlies. That's really interesting. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Katie Bagli, our guest for tonight. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you very much, Usha, for inviting me on board over here. And thank you to Bharat FM too. I am most obliged. Thank you.
Oh, we are honored. Yeah. You have been a source of inspiration for me, Katie. I've always told you, you really inspire me and inspire many others. And let us unravel, Katie, as we proceed with our conversations and expressions on Storytellers Cafe. So, Katie, my first question to you is, you have often said that you began writing only since the past 9 years. What was it that steered you in this direction? So, without asking how old you are, I presume you're very young. And how did you start? Go ahead.
Okay. So it was about 9 years back that my children were well settled, and I found I had more time on hand. So, with other like minded friends, we began to go out into all the green areas of the city and even outside the city and exploring the wilds. We would go on our own or we would go with other nature groups. And I became an active member of Bombay Natural History Society. Earlier in the past, I used to be a sleeping member. But then 9 years back, I became a very active member. I took up volunteers training over there, so I became their volunteer. And that gave me the opportunity to study the flora and fauna around in a manner which I had never imagined. We would go out, we would turn over every stone, look under every leaf, and whatever I saw thrilled me so much. I mean, I felt myself falling head over heels in love with nature. I found it was my calling. And I had to do something about it. All the knowledge that I gained, the discoveries that we made. So I began writing stories and stories for children. And I started circulating those stories to my friends. And they started encouraging me. They started, telling me, why don't you publish these stories? In fact, one very good friend of mine, she told me something which really spurred me on. She said, if you publish a book, I will be the first one to buy it. So that's what set me going. Why not? So my very first book came into being. That was a book about birds, birds of different feathers. And then after that, there was no looking back. That's how I began 9 years ago.
Wonderful, Katie. Like I said, friends, Katie is an immense source of inspiration for a woman like me and many others. As we are embarking on I wouldn't say the final phase of our life, and we start anew, we begin afresh and new beginnings, right, Katie? So, Katie, how was the process? How did you first publish your book? Did you face any problems in publishing it? Can you tell us? Because I'm sure there are so many up and coming writers, authors, as well as storytellers who want to put their pen to paper. So this would be really interesting.
Yes, in those days, 9 years back, it was rather difficult to publish a book because, first of all, there were very few children's publishers. It is within the span of these last few years that so many children's publishers have come up, and even so many self publishing units have suddenly arisen. But when I took my book in hand, I was told, I was advised, look, it's a very difficult world, the world of publishing. You will face all kind of hurdles. And so I was very wary about it all. I did send my manuscript to various publishers. Some of them didn't respond at all. Some of them said, we don't have a children's section. And some of them politely said, we can't publish this. So then I decided, why not print this book myself? So I had a friend who owns a printing press, and she helped me print about 500 copies of the book. And then I realized, in those days, I'm from Mumbai, so we had this Strand bookstall, a very famous bookstall. That was the first bookstall I stepped into with my printed book, and they were very kind. They accepted 25 copies of the book immediately without even any, written agreement or anything. But then I found Strand bookstall is not the only shop. I have to distribute my book, so I began looking into children's bookstores, searching for a good enough distributor. That's how I came across Shri Book Center. I found many of the books were by Shri Book Center. So I sent a copy of my book to this publishing house. And to my greatest amazement, within a few days, I got a phone call saying, I liked your book. Why don't you come down and discuss? We will redo your book, and we would like you to do a set of 6 such books, make a series. So that was how the ball was set rolling. And, it was a big windfall for me. So that's how I began. And afterwards, Book published a lot more of my books. And I also went to other publishers. So bit by bit, it became easier and easier.
Yes, I can understand. Thank you for sharing that information, Katie. Most helpful for everyone, I'm sure. Katie, how did you start writing on nature and wildlife? Because your books focus so much on nature and wildlife. Is there a story behind that?
The stories, as I told you, I was surrounded by friends who loved nature, who were like me. And we kept going out into the wilds, and I found it most fascinating. Little things like a beetle which disguises itself with its own feces, strands of its own feces. And then there are ants which raid the colonies of other ants and take away their babies and convert them into slaves. The world of nature is truly, truly fascinating. In fact, there is, you say it's better than fiction. I mean, fiction, it's a world which really fills you with awe. So there was so much content in nature, and I find it very easy to write about nature rather than any other genre. I found it most fulfilling. And I realized that by writing about nature and wildlife, I am actually opening the minds of other children and hoping, that after all, they are our future green ambassadors. So they will also be afflicted with the same infection, the love for nature like me, and they will help look after our planet in the future.
Very well said. Yes, they are the future, and we need them. We need to educate them, inform them, so that they make an informed choice about saving our planet Earth. That's wonderful, Katie. That brings me to my next question. Has the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic, I still say ongoing because,
Yes.
we still, there seems to be a resurgence. So, has that in any way hampered your work? Did you manage to publish any books during this pandemic?
uh, I should not complain about the pandemic where my work is concerned, because, on the contrary, I got more time to write more during the pandemic. Because earlier, I used to spend a lot of time traveling to schools that were very far off. They would invite me for the lit fairs or for author visits. And here I had time in hand because I was homebound. And there were a few books which were about to be published just before the pandemic and the lockdown. So that came to a standstill for some time. But afterwards, they were published. And in fact, during the pandemic itself, 4 of my books were released. So that was really amazing. So I should thank the pandemic for that.
Uh, that is indeed awesome, Katie. Pandemic has really helped, I think, us storytellers as well as authors. I think it's given us enough time to connect with the entire universe, at least for us storytellers. And
Absolutely.
that's great. What inspires you, Katie? What's your muse? I mean, what gets you kick-started to write a book on a particular subject?
Um, when I go for a nature trail, I come back all charged. Or if I go for a trip somewhere in the wilds, it really charges me. And there are so many incidents that take place, which I put into my story. I weave them into my story. There's one of my books, which is a book of poetry on the wild side. So many of the poems are real life experiences, and even in the other books. So as I told you, the very bizarre, fascinating, intriguing, mind boggling behavior of creatures of nature is what really inspires me into writing about them, converting them into stories. It makes me feel very fulfilled, once I've written a story of such creatures.
Very well said, Katie. Yeah, we all get inspired, but some of us find it difficult to put pen to paper or words don't flow. Have you ever faced a writer's block? Has it happened to you where
Um, Not really. I shouldn't say I've faced a writer's block. I mean, there are times when you write a little bit, and then there's a long gap when you're off writing because of other preoccupations. But I've not really faced a writer's block so far. So fortunately for that.
absolutely, fortunately? Um, Katie, tell me that do you illustrate your own books? Because I have a few of your books and there are illustrations. So, do you have another illustrator or do you do it yourself?
It varies with the publisher, from publisher to publisher. I have illustrated many of my books. All my books, with 3 books, I have illustrated. But there are other publishers who prefer to use their in-house illustrators. So it just depends. But I like to illustrate, although I'm not really a professional illustrator, I can say just an amateur. But I know my story so well. So that element I can put into my illustration, the part of the story which speaks out in the illustration. I feel I can put into it.
That's amazing. Katie has, on many occasions, collaborated with storytellers, other artists, in bringing her stories alive. And it's not that she's an author there, she is very much an active participant in the whole production. So I have also had the privilege of collaborating with Katie at the museum. And it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. You're a powerhouse of talent, Katie. That brings me to my next question. Which part of being an author gives you most satisfaction? Is it the process of writing itself? The fact that your book gets accepted by a publisher? The promotion of your own book? Or the marketing of your book? I know that's quite a long winded question.
Yes. It's difficult to answer. Yes, all of it does give me fulfillment. But actually, Usha, the greatest satisfaction I get is not the marketing or the promotion or the accepting of the book. It is, when a child suddenly tells me in the middle of a workshop or in any of my events, the child comes up to me and says, I've read this book of yours and I really enjoyed it. Or I know all the stories of this book of yours, Birds of Different Feathers. That gives me greatest satisfaction. I feel my goal has been achieved because I'm reaching out to children and they are accepting what I have done for them. That is what really gives me satisfaction.
Commendable. I totally agree with you, Katie. That's what gives one immense satisfaction. And my last question for the evening, before we move on to listen to a story from you, is a very pertinent question in this day and age. What is your opinion about digital books as compared to hard copy books?
I would
Uh,
definitely go in. Yes.
Physical. Yeah.
Physical. I would go in for the physical copies. Absolutely. In fact, I feel all awkward, trying to read an ebook. I get lost sometimes. But a hard copy book is part of a culture, you can say. You're sitting on a rainy day in the corner of a room reading a book, or you're exploring through a library which has shelves and shelves of books. Smell of a book, the feel of the book, the sound of the turning of the pages. I know a little girl who, she's just about 7 years old. After she reads her book, her grandmother told me she actually rubs the book all over her face just to, soak in the smell of the book, I think, or just immerse herself into the story. So that's how I feel too about hard copy books. I don't think we should do away with hard copies at all.
Agree with you totally. In fact, Katie, when you were talking about the physical copy of the book, the smell, the rustling of the pages, and the memories that it evokes. The smell
Yes.
of the book for me evokes memories, of
Huh?
long forgotten past. And
Yeah.
it's wonderful. And you can't experience that in an ebook. I'm completely, agree with this. But then it has its own uses. Maybe in the present times, when you want to save paper and not leave any extra carbon footprints, I guess, I don't know. But let's leave the jury to that. I don't want to say anything. I would still go with a physical copy. So, Katie, as you know, the USP of Storytellers Cafe is to listen to a story, and you being an author, you write stories, So, is there something today that you would like to share with us?
Yes, I would like to tell you a story from one of my recently published books, a book published by Bombay Natural History Society. This is the book. It's called The Flight of the Pink-Headed Ducks and Other Stories. I will be telling you the story about the pink-headed duck, but a little bit about this book. It has 5 stories of 5 different rare and endangered species, and they're all on the brink of extinction. So I've tried to write stories which, have a note of positivity in them. It leaves the reader with hope that with a little bit of care, we should be able to revive all these species which have been driven to the brink of extinction. We should be able to revive their numbers once again so that they can thrive on our planet all over again. And a little bit about, particularly about the story which I'm going to tell you, the pink-headed duck. The seed for this story was sown 20 years ago, actually, when a friend had lent me a book by an author called Rory Nugent. It was called The Search for the Pink-Headed Duck. And in this book, the person journeys all the way across the Brahmaputra River, right from Kolkata to Myanmar, in search of this pink-headed duck, which has not been seen for over a century. It was last sighted in 1949. After that, it just seemed to have vanished. Nobody knows. But people refuse to give it up as extinct. People feel it is there somewhere in those dense, swampy jungles. So at the end of this book, which I read, the author very nicely describes, he managed to get a glimpse within the shadows of the dark, dense, swampy jungle of Myanmar. He just got a glimpse of a largish duck and then it vanished. And because the pink headed duck is supposed to be larger than all other ducks, he felt that this could have been it. So that seed remained in my head all these years. And suddenly, recently, I started reading about the sixth mass extinction of species. We're losing so many species by the day. So I felt I should write a book for children about endangered species. I picked out 5 endangered species, but the one on top of my mind was the story of the pink-headed duck. So that's a little bit of introduction to this story. And with that, I think I shall start telling you my story of the pink-headed duck.
Please
All
go on.
right? Yes. Okay. A new day had begun for the island people of Bangladesh as the sky turned crimson, driving away darkness. 12-year-old Daivik was already heading for the old boat, which he would row along the tributary of the river Jamuna. The young lad used to go fishing with his father from the age of 9 and had learnt all the tricks of the trade. Only a year ago, his father had died. Daivik, now orphaned, had only his old grandmother as family. He had lost his mother when he was a mere infant. Though still a child, the responsibility of earning a livelihood for himself and his grandmother had fallen upon Daivik, which he took up with great aplomb. The monsoon season was over at last, and the islanders were now allowed by the government to go fishing. During the monsoon months, fishing was prohibited, as that was the breeding time for the fish. If all the newborn fish were caught, the river would be depleted of fish in no time. Besides, the swift currents during the rains made boating dangerous. The river of many moods would now have calmed down. She would no longer be violent. She would be gentle and welcoming. The thought that he could once again go fishing every day made Daivik happy. He looked forward to feasting on the delicious fish curry his grandmother would cook. Besides, there would be plenty more fish to sell in the market too. From the money he earned, he would be able to buy all kinds of goodies like the mouth-watering, juicy chom-choms and rosagollas from the sweet shop for himself and his grandmother. Davik always sang when he was in a good mood. That morning, too, he sang to the river. Oh river, you fill me with good cheer. I know you have plenty of fish for my grandma to make a tasty dish. Be kind, O river, to give me plenty, so I can sell them and earn a little money. Derek's exuberant mood got the better of him. He felt adventurous that day. He decided to row further out towards the small, distant island where no one lived and no one went. He was always curious to know what this remote island was like and had a secret desire to explore it. The villagers normally did not go very far away from their own island as they didn't need to. The waters around their own island held abundant fish. Just as Daivik was approaching the distant deserted island, he saw something strange. A small pink cloud rose from the marsh and began to circle overhead. As this rosy cloud approached closer, Davik's heart beat began to race with excitement. What had appeared as a cloud was actually a flock of birds. He could hear their raucous calls, a weird fusion of honking, gaggling, and quacking. With a noisy flutter, the cloud broke up, and the birds descended like parachutes onto the other side of the island. There were 16 unusually large ducks. Divik counted them while they came down. One of the ducks, however, did not fly off with the flock, but swooped down straight towards his boat and perched upon the bow. It stared unblinkingly out of its pink eyes at Divik, as if it knew him well. Its rose pink head contrasted beautifully with its dark brown body. The duck swayed its long, graceful neck back and forth, as if it was trying to tell Divik something. He noticed that the tip of the duck's left wing was a bit frayed, as if someone had tried pulling off its feathers. The boy was thrilled to bits. Where had these birds come from? He had never seen them before, yet there was something vaguely familiar about the bird perched before him. And suddenly a chord struck. He used to wear a shirt that had a pink headed duck embroidered on it by his grandmother when he was small. It used to be his favorite shirt. Divik reached out his hand to touch the duck, but it flapped its great wings and made off to where the rest of its flock had flown. That afternoon, while his grandmother cooked the fish, Divik told her about his discovery. Aha, the pink headed ducks! She exclaimed. They used to be around here when I was just a child. People used to hunt them and relish eating them, just like the other poultry in the market. Perhaps that is why the few that were left flew away elsewhere. I wonder where they had gone all these years. On a sudden whim, David pulled out the tin trunk from under his bed and rummaged inside, looking for all through the knickknacks and toys. And yes, he found it. The shirt with a pink headed duck embroidered on it. And by a strange coincidence, guess what? The threads of the left wingtip had come loose. Thereafter, David went every day to his special secret island to watch the pink headed ducks, especially the bold one with the frayed left wing that had dared to land on his boat. With each passing day, this bird became bolder and would let Divik stroke its smooth feathers. It would greedily snatch from his hand the dry fish which he specially carried with him. Amazing as it may seem, the bird would cock its head from side to side while David made small talk as if it had understood every word. Sometimes it would hop onto one of his shoulders and gently peck David's head with its long reddish beak as if showering him with kisses. David did not tell anybody in the village about the return of the pink headed ducks. It was to remain a guarded secret which he and his grandmother shared. He was not sure if the villagers would treat these long lost birds kindly. But much to his chagrin, it didn't remain a secret for long. Some of the villagers began to notice David rowing far off towards the distant island where nobody went. They wondered why. What was drawing him there? One evening, when Divik took the excess fish he had caught to sell in the market, he was in for a rude shock. Lying in a heap along with other garbage just outside Bosca's poultry shop were pink and black feathers. Hanging on display along with other poultry which were being sold for their meat were four of the pink headed ducks, all dead their beautiful feathers plucked off. He knew it was them because of their enormous size in comparison with the other common poultry. His stomach churned at the sight, and he couldn't stop the tears welling up in his eyes. Why have you slaughtered these ducks? Where did you find them? David cried out in anger and hurt. He never liked loud-mouthed Bosco, and at that moment he hated him even more. At this juncture, I shall just show you the illustration pertaining to the scene which was done by Zainab Tambawala of the poultry shop and Darwig, and you can see Bosco inside the shop. Well, well, young man, these ducks are being sold just like any of the other fowl here in this shop, replied Bosco with a smug smile on his face. They are much larger and have more meat on them, which means more money for me. So Bosco had discovered the ducks. He must have got into one of the fishermen's boats and followed him slyly to his secret island. And now everybody would soon know about them. An old man with a mop of silver hair and a flowing silver beard, who was loitering outside the shop, commented, "Don't you know these pink-headed ducks were believed to have vanished from the face of this earth? If the foreigners come to know that they have returned, they would bend over backwards to get hold of them. They would offer a handsome price to get possession of these ducks so that they could sell them to zoos all over the world." Bosco's eyes danced under his bushy black eyebrows. He could only see the money they would fetch him. He could not see their beauty and their need to be free in the wild. Then I should round the rest of them tomorrow and put them into cages, all ready to be presented to the foreigners. Could you help me reach out to the foreigners? He asked the old man. I will pay you an adequate fee. On hearing this, David determined to relocate all the remaining birds that very night before Bosco could lay his filthy hands on them. He would take them to a place where the greedy man would never be able to find them. The boy's grandmother was worried. She tried to talk him out of going. "It is very windy tonight. The river is in an angry mood. What if the boat overturns? What will you do all alone in the dark? If you venture too far out, you may come across crocodiles." But nothing would deter Diwick. Gathering his fishing nets, a bottle of drinking water, and a kerosene lamp, he was off. He walked through the streets as stealthily as possible, hoping not to be seen. He had to walk through the marketplace to reach the shore. All the shops were closed, and the place wore a deserted look. But then suddenly, he heard voices. One of them he recognized as Bosco's. "So what if the river is violent tonight? I want to capture those birds, come what may. After all, I'm not paying you a hefty fee for nothing." It was Bosco talking rather gruffly to Umesh, the boatman, who often ferried people between islands in his motorboat. David could feel butterflies fluttering furiously in his stomach. He had to act very swiftly. He had to reach the secret island before Bosco, so he broke into a run. On reaching his boat, he dumped the nets, bottle, and lamp inside just as he was about to drop anchor and take off. An idea struck him. He sprinted to where Umesh's motorboat was, along with his water bottle, and emptied half the bottle into the fuel tank. He hoped that the water would slow down the engine and perhaps stop it altogether. Indeed, he realized that what he had done was not quite nice. He did feel a twinge of guilt, but he was desperate to accomplish his mission. Without wasting any more time, David hopped into his own boat and began rowing frantically thinking only of the pink-headed ducks he was out to salvage from being captured by Bosco. It was a dark new moon night. Derrick's boat began to rock with the tossing waves, and the wind howled in his ears. The monsoons are supposed to be over. How come it's so stormy tonight? He wondered. Freaky weather, he muttered. Stormy or not, he had to reach the island where the ducks roosted as soon as possible. So he rowed hard, even though he had tampered with the engine of the motorboat that Bosco was planning to ride. What if his plan did not work and the man managed to reach there before him? At last, he reached his secret island. Although it was pitch dark, he could hear the lapping of the waves on the shore and knew exactly where he was. The sound of water meeting land is different for every island. And but Derrick's ears were fine-tuned to it. Somehow the island appeared to be rather eerie in the darkness of night. Everything seemed to be still and quiet, except for the non-stop chirping of crickets. Chirp, 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 chirp. He had to make sure he did not startle the ducks wherever they were, or else they would take to the air and he would not be able to get them into his nets. The silence of the night was suddenly broken by an owl hooting loudly just above his head. He was so startled he nearly dropped his kerosene lamp. Ooh. This was followed by a strange cackling sound, like a witch's laughter, which sent a chill down Derrick's spine and gave him goosebumps. But he soon discovered where the cackling came from. His lamp showed up a hyena that was perhaps calling out to its mate, or maybe expressing its frustration at not finding something to scavenge upon. Then Derrick saw something that made him stop in his tracks. A ghost-like tree that was strangely enough glowing with a greenish light. Was this real or was he dreaming? He went closer and dared to touch it, and then he realized what was producing this radiance. It was fungus. The bark was completely covered by bioluminescent fungus. The night seemed to wear on. Derrick walked and walked till he reached the other side of the island. He almost lost hope, thinking that the birds had gone elsewhere. Just then, he saw them, all 12 ducks, huddled behind a large boulder. They were sleeping, but they were too far away for him to drag all the way back to his boat. So he retraced his steps and hurried back to where his boat was anchored. He had to row all the way around the island to the other side where his ducks were. Now was the tricky part. Derrick had to catch all 12 of them using his two fishing nets without alarming them into flight. Very expertly and swiftly, he hurled both nets and managed to catch them, 6 ducks in each of the nets. He had to make 2 trips, dragging each of the 2 bundles of huddled up birds back to his boat. The birds were startled, of course, out of their sleep and protested loudly. Hush, I'm sorry if you feel uncomfortable, Derrick tried to console them, but it is for your own safety and freedom. Just bear with me. He hoped fervently that Bosco did not reach the island before he had completed his rescue mission. But just while he was dragging the second lot of ducks to his boat, he heard a distinct sputtering sound that was getting louder every second. It was the motorboat approaching. His heart began thumping in his ears. Perhaps Umesh had refilled the fuel tank with fresh diesel when his boat gave trouble while starting. Surely Bosco would find him out. What were the birds making such a ruckus? At last, he managed to get the second lot of ducks too into the boat. Dropping anchor, he began to row as he had never rowed before. He rowed and rowed and rowed. He knew not where. He only knew that he had to take them as far away as possible from his own island. At no cost should Bosco catch sight of his boat. When Divick had reached far enough and he was sure he was not being followed, he felt a bit relieved. But he still had to find the right type of land to release the ducks in. He mused at the look on Bosco's face when he found that the ducks were not there. Anyhow, he did not want to take any chances and did not want to slacken with the rowing. His arms ached, his mouth was dry with thirst, and he felt exhausted. But he would not stop, even to rest for a while. He must have been rowing all night, for just as he reached the main Jamuna River, the first rays of sunlight, morning, invaded the inky black darkness of night and lightened the sky. The strong wind of the night had subsided. The river seemed serene and appeared to invite him with open arms, telling him that all was safe here. He was not very far off from the river bank, and he let his boat drift towards it, giving his arms some rest. A thick mangrove jungle stood before him. Owing to the meshwork of still roots and upward pointing breathing roots belonging to the tall mangrove trees, the surrounding water was quite calm. He could hear the cheeping and chirping and twittering of various birds welcoming a new day. This, Divick thought, was just the right place to release the ducks. There were no people around. No one would venture into the mangrove jungle, as all around was extremely marshy, and the roots made it impossible to walk. Divick untied the net and released the pink-headed ducks. 11 of them flew off and in no time vanished into the jungle. But not the bold one, his special friend. It sat on the bow of the boat, opening and closing its large beak, talking to Divick. He pushed the bird off the boat, but it came back stubbornly. Again and again, Divick would push it off the boat, but again and again it would hop back. You have to go, my friend, cried the boy, tears streaming down his cheeks. This is your new home. You're in the wild where you belong. You will stay safe and free. Finally, as if it had understood, it flapped its great wings and reluctantly took off. Divick rowed back towards his own island with mixed feelings. I will just show you here the illustration of Divick and the pink-headed duck. The pink-headed duck is stubbornly sitting on the boat, refusing to go. Anyhow, he rowed back towards his own island with mixed feelings. He would never see those beautiful birds again. He would never be able to play with his pink-headed friend again. Just then, his eyes fell on some pink feathers entangled in his nets. He picked them up gently and stuffed them in his shirt pocket. They were to go into his trunk, which contained his embroidered shirt and other treasures. The pink-headed ducks were safe now, safe from Bosco and others like him who would never be able to find them. These thoughts made Divick feel light-hearted and he cheered up. He patted himself on his back. He had single-handedly outwitted the man. Anando, Anando, he called out crazily to no one in particular. Great joy, great joy. My pink-headed ducks are safe and free. They are in the wild where they belong. How disappointed Bosco must have felt last night when all his efforts and money he spent to capture the ducks came to naught. Divick conjectured the look of shock on Bosco's face when he found out that the ducks had vanished. He felt greatly amused thinking about it. He began to laugh loudly while the river and the jungle and the sky above looked on. From within the jungle he had left behind, he could hear a faint but distinct honking. It was his pink headed friend. David was sure of that. It was sharing his mirth and laughing along with him. Goodbye, my friend, my pink headed friend. I know we shan't meet again. Your memories forever in my head. Goodbye, my friend, my pink headed friend. I'm glad you are safe somewhere. No one can ever find you out there. Goodbye, 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 my friend. So that's the story. I hope you enjoyed it.
Absolutely, Katie. This is like taking me back to the island of adventure, castle of adventure, all that I read as a young girl. Beautiful, beautiful, fantastic. I mean, more power to you. What a
Thank
fantastic picture that you painted through your words. So, as we are running out of time, I would have to wrap up our conversation. Thank you, Katie. Wonderful. And to all the listeners out there, do watch out in the bio. Katie will have her where you can purchase the books and the website and other links to it. And we'll also post it on the chat um, today while you're watching so that you can go out and purchase the book. Thank you, Katie. It's been a great pleasure to host you. And any parting words for our listeners?
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening patiently. And yes, this book is available on Amazon, so do look out for it. You can look out for my other books also. I have a website, katiebagli.com, so you can see all my books out over there. Thank you. I hope you liked it.
We enjoyed it.
All right.
Thank you, Katie.
It was
So,
a pleasure telling the story.
and what a beautiful story. And with that, my friends, it's a wrap. So, see you next Sunday for yet another edition of Storytellers Cafe. And happy Holi.
Happy Holi to you too. Happy Holi.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.